All right, you got me. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Not literally, even though I would take that literally because I'm a pretty literate person if you haven't figured that out in the past 10 years or so. I'm wearing the pink polo shirt in honor of a band we're going to be talking about today. Pink Floyd at Pompeii. Let's talk about this. Hey everybody, welcome back. Psychedelic here. What am I doing with Pink Floyd at Pompeii? Am I following trends? Am I following the latest, hottest, newest releases out there? Becoming an influencer and picking up what's hot on the shelves right now? Apparently. Being a little silly because I don't think I've ever picked up anything brand new that came out. For me, it's yesterday. This came out. I'm recording this Saturday evening. But yeah, something this fresh in the collection, saying something. I feel like I have to give a little bit of backstory. I did listen to this today. We're going to be talking about Pink Floyd at Pompeii and just kind of give you my personal take on it, what I think about it, what influenced me to pick this up. And yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my back history with the band a little bit because I feel like I always need to go out of my way and explain it a little bit because Pink Floyd, I mean, they're obviously one of the more successful rock groups out there that everybody knows and talks about. But I'm coming from a place where I was very self-guided in the learning curve as far as me exploring music my whole life, really. I've never had anybody I looked up to, never had any role models per se, outside maybe the Acid Archives for a little bit of a bonus, but that's about all that's really kept me going the last however many years. Deep dives, the deep dives that I go through, and it's just all because of, honestly, just passionately trying to seek the sounds that I love out there. And I think Pink Floyd in a lot of ways were responsible for that, you know, minus all of the hype and just hearing from peers and just a little bit about him in music history books over the years. You know, I didn't necessarily have any too big of assumptions going into the band. I just went in fresh into the mix with their big albums, of course. You know, Dark Side I started with. I think the next one I picked up was Wish You Were Here. Then I went back a little bit, Obscured by Clouds, whatever I could find at the time. And we're talking like 2005, 2006. And I just picked up on these sounds. They were just really speaking to me. I'd never heard an album continuously flow like Dark Side before. That was just a whole new revelation to me. And I think by the time, because I discovered like Piper pretty late, I went ahead of ways, you know, Animals, The Wall. And I've always kind of loosely said Pink Floyd were probably my number one favorite band. But of course that's, you know, I don't have much weight in that whole discussion anymore. I mean, I don't really rank my favorite bands of all time because it's just so far and in between concerning what I collect, you know, a lot of one and done records. So it's more like my top favorite psych pop LPs from 1968. Like that's easier for me than simply listing off just all these big bands. But I've always loosely said, I mean, Pink Floyd were one of the first bands that I just went full hog into their discography, same as Black Sabbath. Those were kind of the two Kickstarter bands. So once I arrived at Pompeii, it was kind of one of the more last ones I discovered, and honestly, probably one of the more life-changing discoveries once I finally bought the DVD when it came out, like, when was it, 2003, 2002, around there? I don't know where it's at, honestly. I think it might be back at my parents' house in one of the tubs or something. So with all that said, I hadn't seen the footage in a long time. I mean, I'd see clips here and there on YouTube and, you know, kind of watch it a little bit, but I did not go to the IMAX to see the re-release. I don't think it's even playing around my area. Would have loved to have seen it. Looks like it was kind of a limited release, but it sounds like there's a Blu-ray out already, or I think it's out already, right? Might pick it up down the road, but from the clips I saw online, it looks pretty sharp, man. Really brightens up, really pops out more than ever. You get to see all the you get to see everything in their facial expressions, and it's just cleaned up so well visually. From the little bit that I've seen. It was directed by Adrian Mabin. Yeah, Adrian Mabin. And so with this vinyl release, let's finally get to this discussion. I know it's kind of long-winded and finally getting to the point, but the reason I picked this up, it's not because I'm trendy, or I guess you can call me a consumer now because it's a brand new release like this, but it's just not in my nature to pick up these kind of things because it's got the RSD mentality where they're always shoving out the same material over and over again. However, this particular area of focus is kind of one of those records that was always bootlegged several times over the years. Even on VHS, I think it was like heavily bootlegged from what I recall. I don't know all of its back history. Even me being a diehard fan, I don't even know all of it. But this is a great resurrection of what the band was truly on the cusp of, you know, with Dark Side of the Moon right around the corner. I always thought by this time, once metal came about, because these guys were fresh off of metal, they finally restrained a little bit more of the experimental side that they were kind of going through, those cycles where they were a little directionless, you know, with Ummagumma, Adam Hart Mother. I mean, the band members themselves kind of disowned them. You know, and it always makes me laugh, you know, thinking that the fans that love Dark Side also love those experimental kind of avant-garde kind of records, but I don't know. I mean, it's not to say that they all should love it, because I love most of it. Now, going back to their discography though, you know, I guess the eras I don't listen to as much anymore is like sort of when Roger was kind of taking more control with Animals and The Wall and the Final Cut. It's like, we get it. You have a lot of pent-up hatred towards certain people and certain classes and all this sort of thing, and it just it's not very entertaining for me anymore as it once was when I was vulnerable and didn't know a whole lot about it. But I did get to see Roger perform the whole Wall album live, which is a, you know, spectacle for sure. That was back in like 2012. Well, anyways, where was I going with that tangent? So back to this, like they kind of restrain a little bit more on the experimental side. They sort of refine, kind of retune their whole structure as far as some of these lengthy jams are concerned, because they are all pretty much largely instrumental jams on here. You got Echoes Part 1 and 2. I think Echoes is kind of like their most defining song of like who they are, like it really identifies with them. Careful with that Oxygene. I've always loved that track. I think I've always liked the Ummagumma version. And then I think they did one like pre-Dark Side, like 73. I think they performed it. I saw some footage that's floated around back in the day. I really love that kind of slow burning version. This one seems a little more rushed, a little more, you know, finely kept. Like they don't really drag on and on with the whole instrumental leading up to Roger's scream. But obviously, these songs go hand in hand for me. Set the Controls and Saucerful of Secrets. I always thought of them as like the perfect pairing. It was kind of like their two set pieces when they would perform them live, you know, around 68, 60, 69, around there, when they got first released. And I think they're the best jams off of this performance as well. And then, of course, you go into One of These Days, highlighting Nick Mason's performance. You know, with him dropping the drumstick, he just is still able to keep that rhythm up. And we'll talk more about his drumming here in a minute. But Mademoiselle Knobs, again, sort of like a reworking of Seamus from Metal, and then closing out on Echoes. And then side D here, you got another alternate take of Careful with That Oxygene. Not as interesting. It's about the same time length, but I'd say it's not as memorable as, say, the original version they kept. And then you have like the full-length, unedited Saucerful Secrets, which I might prefer. Seems like I like when they lengthen out the little moments creeping up to when Nick Mason is introduced into that track. So with all that said, how does this actually sound, being remastered, restored? I do think that this is probably the best outcome so far as how it sounds. Steven Wilson, I don't know a whole lot of his background. Isn't he with Porcupine Tree? See, that's how little I know. But Steven Wilson, I think he's got pretty good ears, and I would assume he was the right man for the job. I'm pretty pleased at what he's remixed and brought up front and brought a little more in the back section from all members. But they all stand out in different moments in different tracks. Like Nick Mason, the drums are really fiery and punchy on Saucerful, which in the past they were always kind of hidden, a little thin. Set the Controls, again, that's really a shining star off this one. I love the version on this one as well. Rick's little improv keys going on, like halfway through the track, is really cosmic in its own way. Their version of Echoes on here, I think all members really shine. Great bass work from Waters. You got Rick and Dave on vocals. You can hear them very clearly this time around. It was always kind of hard to hear like Rick's vocals, at least it was for me when I would hear it on the DVD. But that's DVD audio. And then we have like a little Pompeii intro. I think it's merely like, it starts with a heartbeat for like a minute or so, and then it goes into some sort of like a music concrete. I think it's like the intro to Set the Controls with the, so you got some light gong hitting, all very well mixed. Mademoiselle Knobs, maybe not, it's certainly not a highlight in any ways, with the whole dog taking a solo session there for like about 2 minutes. But of course they got to include it because it was during that same time period. And I'd love to see the visual transfer in action. I mean, I've only just seen the clips online, but I was just kind of excited to pick this up just because this morning I had listened to the Rock City Kitties podcast hosted by Emma Vinyl Lowe and Dylan. And they just, they talked about it for about an hour, and they just really they kind of refreshed my memory of like how much I loved Pompeii. And to get an official release like this on vinyl is, for me personally, it's not a cash grab. It's really what the fans deserved for a lot of years, and deservedly so. I think I can't really think of one critique or a negative thing to say about this, except maybe it would have been kind of nice to have a little bit of, liner notes or something outside of just the basic details. It says a little bit of how it was remixed and how it was cut and all that sort of thing. But I wish there was a little bit of like foreword from like Steven Wilson or something. Just the experience reflecting back, listening to these. And Rick Wright, he's obviously the secret sauce. He's kind of what it's the whole tone of the band's sound, in my opinion. But, they're all individually carrying the weight as to what was to come, before they would break out in the mainstream. As much as that is going on, too, I'd say, re-listening to this with fresh ears, it certainly doesn't have as tripped out or spaced out improvisational type of things happening here, because I think like I said, by metal, they kind of had a little bit of a more distinctful sound as far as like what was to come, with like Wish You Were Here and stuff. Kind of making a more stronger concept with some structures and kind of putting these pieces behind because they were on to the next best thing. So yeah, recorded in 71. And I think the film came out like the next year, right? 72. And then I think some of the footage too was that with the director's cut? Yeah, I think the director's cut is the one with the I want pie with no crust. Which which is always great. And then, you know, all the interviews with the band members in black and white while they're working on Dark Side. So, yeah, just kind of wanted to highlight this today and share it off and see what you guys think of this. Have you picked your copy up? I haven't even shown it all yet. So it came with these 2 inner sleeves, which, you know, I kind of knew going in that I had to replace these with MoFi sleeves. And it could have chose some better pictures here. I know we got to show off the Pink Floyd gear, but, you know, we could have had, as they said on the podcast, we could have had Nick Mason with his mustache handlebars going on. So I got them in a MoFi here. And then, of course, this is a nice little bonus. I'm definitely hanging this up. We got the Pink Floyd poster. I think this is kind of replicated just like the original back in the day. You best believe I'm going to hang this up. Now, of course, you know, with Pink Floyd, there's all different types of fans out there. I do know some people that think they're kind of overrated or don't like them at all because they're their sound, but I'm one of those genuine listeners that likes to revisit them from time to time. And if I'm ever casually listening to them, I usually tend to go towards, like, you know, Syd Barrett era. But I also really love the More soundtrack and, you know, their experimental, kind of spacey, trying to figure out their sound kind of era with some of their, like, rural rockers, you know, or, you know, Grantchester Meadows, you know, some of the more acoustic Floyd is always fun as well. I mean, I love all eras, except, like I said, you know, last few years, I've been thinking about, you know, Animals, The Wall, Final Cut, especially Momentary Lapse of Reason. Have never really liked that record. But the Division Bell for me has always been like their grand finale. I really do like that record. It can be pretty somber at times, but I think it was a nice, very nice send-off and has aged pretty well, concerning how kind of new agey it sounds a little bit. And Endless River, I've never really considered their final LP, but I do like some of the solo records too that they've all put out. Probably Rick Wright the most. He's probably my favorite member of them all. You know, I've always liked his work, his compositions, you know, Wearing the Inside Out, stuff like that. But I do have a David Gilmour concert on DVD that, you know, I thrifted years ago, and great skillful guitar player. You know, you can tell there's a lot of blues intertwined with his very emotional, he can make a guitar cry kind of sound. I can only take that in bits and pieces anymore, but this was like the beginning of that. It was kind of like a more dramatized sort of guitar solos happening on there, especially on like the version of Echoes on there. I know it's kind of long-winded talking about one release, but just felt the need to share a little bit of a Floyd discussion. Pink Floyd at Pompeii. And this was fairly reasonably priced, I'd say. It was about $42. I think I've seen prices where it was like $48 and $52. So I got it for $42. I don't know. It was worth it for me, so gotta splurge sometimes. I'm trying to think of a Pink Floyd lyric to conclude the video on. We'll see you on the dark side of the moon, I guess. Anyways, take care.